Great Britain has a collection of varied landscapes and countryside to rival anywhere else in the world.
And the best way to see it is to walk.
And we are here to provide some ideas and inspiration. We are the team at Walks Around Britain, and we've been discovering some of the most interesting and varied short walks, from the Highlands of Scotland to the Channel Islands. We've been there discovering the best walking Britain has to offer. If you thought walking was just about mountains, then think again. We've got walks in the countryside, along water and the coast, through woodlands and forests, up fells and hills, around historic buildings and our industrial past, and not forgetting walks through our towns and cities. Walks to do by yourself, in a group, or with your family, be they the human or canine kind. Along the way, we'll be telling fascinating stories about the landscape, its people, and its history. It's all designed to get you out and inspired to experience it for yourselves. Welcome to Walks Around Britain.
Hello, and you're very welcome to another edition of Walks Around Britain. Now, in today's programme, we've got two walks which are linked by the fact that they're old railway lines.
Later in the programme, I walk from York along the old East Coast Main Line. But first, it's to the Isle of Man. This walk takes in an old railway line and a gorgeous part of the coast. By starting at Kirkmichael and down the valley of Glen Wyllin, along the beach to Glenmore and back along the trackbed. It's a walk of around 3.5 miles and should take around 2.5 hours. Because I've travelled to the island on the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company ferry, I've got the benefit of my own car, and I've parked in the car park just off Station Road. Kirkmichael is only 5.25 miles, as the crow flies, away from the highest point on the Isle of Man, Snay Fell, so the hills of the central belt of the island aren't too far away. Despite its size, the Isle of Man had an extensive railway network by the turn of the 20th century. But by the 1960s, it was in crisis, and the line which had been the Manx Northern Railway, of which Kirkmichael was on, was eventually closed in 1969. Today, these mock-level crossing gates show where the railway once was, along with a section of track. Most of the stations along this old line have long gone.
But here at Kirkmichael, they changed their railway station into a different type of station.
So whereas in the old days, steam locomotives would stop here carrying passengers and freight, today the station buildings are the home of the local fire station. Although the line was closed in 1969, it wasn't until 1974 when the track was lifted, and in 1993, as part of a year of celebrations to mark the centenary of the Manx Electric Railway, a heritage trail was created on the old track beds between Douglas, Peel and Ramsey. The Manx Northern Railway had some significant challenges on their chosen route around the west coast of the island, one of which was here at the valley of Glen Wyllin. The line passed over the valley using this plate girder viaduct, which replaced the original in 1922. The year after the track was lifted, the viaduct here was dismantled, and only the supporting towers remain. So to continue the walk, I need to get down to the level of the glen by this narrow path. From the bottom, you can really see the height of the original viaduct. Once over the beck, the walk heads towards the beach on the Isle of Man's coastal path, the Rad na Fórlian. Glen Wyllin is now an excellent campsite and has a selection of ready-pitch tents available during the summer months. The footpath through the glen leads down to the coast. And what a view! Because of the coastal defences, the Riccall snakes its way above the rocks before dropping down to the beach. There's nothing like a bit of beach walking to warm the soul. Over in the far distance is the coastline of Northern Ireland. Here's where the coastal path has to come inland for a while, and I'm following it up the road to cross over the often busy A4 main road. And into Glen Moor, which is one of the national glens on the island. This is a gorgeous, secluded spot, perfect for some peace and reflection. This was another valley which needed to be crossed by the Manx Northern Railway, and again the stone pillars which once carried the steam trains 70 feet in the air still remain. The Riccall heads to the right here, and I'm heading left over the footbridge over the river through the glen. There's a fairly challenging steep climb to the top of the valley via some steps, and then through an equally challenging overgrown area. But this isn't for long, as I make towards a more open part of the old railway line. This gives you an appreciation for the work needed in cutting through to make this valley. This may be more open, but it means the valley bottom can sometimes become boggy. Make use of the various boards and stones which have been strategically placed. The numerous bridges which carried roads over the railway are still in place, although this one, which carries the A4, has been strengthened with an inner layer of concrete because of the sheer volume of traffic on the road above. I've now reached the south side of the old Glen Wyllin viaduct. which means some more steps down on this side. And more up the other side after crossing the beck again. And then it's a short distance along Station Road and back to the car park.
Well, a lovely walk there on the Isle of Man along an old railway line and part of the coast. Well, after the break, I walk between the Sun and Pluto in Yorkshire. Welcome back to Walks Around Britain. Now usually I like to take walks which keep me very much on the ground, but this walk is actually walking between the Sun and Pluto throughout our solar system.
However, it doesn't involve a trip in a space rocket, just a journey to York. The walk starts just outside York city centre, off the A64, and follows the Trans-Pennine Trail to the village of Riccall. It's a linear walk of around 7.5 miles and should take around 3 hours. The walk starts from the Park and Ride site just off the A64, meaning it is accessible from the city centre by hopping on a Park and Ride bus. One of my 4 border collies, Merlin, is coming with me on this walk, which is perfect for families and for people with limited mobility. And it has some great stories attached to it. This route used to be an old railway line, and evidence of the base of old signals are still around. Now, as well as a walking path, this route is also part of the National Cycle Network, route number 65, and was the first to be opened by the then newly formed Sustrans back in 1987. One of the reasons this walk is great for families is this model of the solar system all along the way. This is our star, the Sun. And just on the other side of the A64 bridge is the nearest planet to the Sun, Mercury. And here you get a sense of the size.
Now the scale of the model is 575,872,239 to 1. Meaning that for every 100 metres along the trail, it's actually 57 million kilometres in space.
So the next planet, Venus, is 188 metres away from the Sun, which is really 108 million kilometres, or 67 million miles. Because Venus rotates on its own axis slower than it goes round the Sun, a day on Venus is actually longer than a year. For the model of our own planet, we've got the Moon as well, which again is to scale. It took the Apollo moon missions around 3 days to get to our nearest neighbour in space. The model of the solar system was installed by the University of York in 1999, and it's great to tell little ones that instead of just walking from York to Riccall, you're actually walking between the Sun and Pluto.
Now, I mentioned that this was once an old railway line, and usually in Britain that means that Dr. Beeching was responsible. But on this occasion, it was something different.
In the 1970s, the National Coal Board discovered a new source of coal in North Yorkshire, the Selby coalfield. The original East Coast Main Line from London to Edinburgh ran straight through this area and was at risk of mining subsidence, so the whole line was moved to the west, bypassing Selby entirely and solving the problem. And the old track bed which was left became this walking and cycling route. Here in the village of Bishopsthorpe, the land all around the old line has been built on top of, meaning this section snakes through the new housing estate. But eventually we find the old line again. I can't help but wonder what this area looked like when the trains hurtled under this bridge. As well as carrying steam locomotives like Flying Scotsman and Mallard on express services between London and the north, this line also provided local stopping trains between York, Selby and Doncaster. It's hard to imagine that up to 1983 this was once a busy railway main line. Back to the solar system, and the next planet on the route is the largest, Jupiter, which dwarfs all of the inner planets.
So you've got to remember that these planets are all in scale. So the giant red spot, the big storm on Jupiter, will fit 3 Earths inside it.
The railway bridge over Acaster Lane was a favourite location for train spotters back in the day. Just south of Bishopsthorpe, the old East Coast Main Line crossed the River Ouse on a bridge which was made of 2 wrought iron bowstring spans. The shorter one on the east side of the river, on the right here, was fixed, measuring 108 feet, and the longer one, some 180 feet, was the swing part, built to allow tall boats safe passage to York. It was operated from a cabin perched on the top of the bridge, but it was removed on the closure of the line for safety reasons.
As part of the Millennium celebrations, local artist Pete Rogers was asked to design a sculpture to sit in its place. There was 3 options, and the overwhelming vote was for the Fisher of Dreams.
The sculpture is made using galvanised 2 cm diameter steel rods, and the fissure is some 4 metres higher than the top of the bridge. It was installed on the bridge in August 2001. In days gone by, the bridge will have seen local mixed freight services crossing its span. The beautiful ringed planet of Saturn is next. And just a few metres away, near the old Neyburn station, is a 3rd scale model of the spaceship Cassini, launched in 1997 to visit Saturn. The old Neyburn station is now a hostel. Right, I've now walked past Uranus, some 2.87 billion kilometres from the Sun, and Neptune, a staggering 4.5 billion kilometres from the Sun. But Neptune isn't the last object in our solar system.
Right, I'm nearly at the end of the solar system, and we're coming up to a planet which is no longer a planet actually. This is Pluto. Now if I was to carry on walking on the same scale to get to the next star, which is Alpha Centauri, I'd be walking nearly twice around the Earth.
So, after an amazing trip through the solar system, how do I get back to York? A space shuttle? The Enterprise? The TARDIS?
I'm going to catch a bus back to York. Well, 2 great railway themed walks there. If you'd like to do those walks, you can visit our website for all the information, including route directions and maps. And that's at walksaroundbritain.co.uk. And if you've got any photos or videos of your walks that you've done that you'd like to share with us, then you can do that on our social media channels. The addresses are on the screen now. Well, until next time, thanks for watching and happy walking.